You're walking down the bustling streets of Chicago in 1893. The World's Fair has transformed this city into a gleaming monument to progress and innovation. Millions of visitors pour in from across America and beyond, wide-eyed and eager to witness the marvels of the modern age. But just blocks away from the fairgrounds, something unspeakable is happening. Behind the doors of an ordinary-looking building, a charming doctor is perfecting the art of murder. His name is Herman Webster Mudgett, but the world will come to know him as H.H. Holmes, and he's about to earn a chilling distinction: America's first documented serial killer. Picture Holmes as his victims saw him. He's handsome, well-dressed, with penetrating blue eyes and a smile that seems to radiate warmth and trustworthiness. When he speaks to you, his voice is smooth, cultured, persuasive. He's exactly the kind of man a young woman arriving alone in the big city would feel safe talking to. He's exactly the kind of businessman your father would approve of. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Holmes arrived in Chicago around 1886, a man already running from a past littered with fraud, theft, and suspicious deaths. He talked his way into a job at a drugstore owned by a Mrs. Holton, whose husband had recently died. Within months, Mrs. Holton herself mysteriously disappeared. Holmes told neighbors she'd moved to California. The truth was far darker, but no one questioned the charming young pharmacist who now owned her store. But owning a simple drugstore wasn't enough for Holmes. He had grander visions. Directly across from his pharmacy, he began construction on what he told city officials would be a mixed-use building, a hotel to capitalize on the coming World's Fair crowds. The local newspapers called it the World's Fair Hotel. History would give it a different name: the Murder Castle. Here's where the story becomes truly horrifying. Holmes designed much of the building himself, and he did so with murder in mind. But he was clever about it, pathologically clever. He hired and fired construction crews constantly, ensuring no single group of workers understood the building's complete layout. No one could see the full picture of what he was creating. Each contractor built their small piece of the puzzle, never realizing they were constructing a death trap. Imagine walking through this building today if it still stood. You enter on the ground floor where everything seems normal. There's the pharmacy, some retail shops. But climb the stairs to the second and third floors and you enter a labyrinth designed by a madman. You find yourself in a hallway that seems to stretch impossibly long. Doors line both sides, over 100 rooms in total, but something feels wrong. Some doors open to brick walls. Others open to nothing at all, just dizzying drops to the basement below. Or hallways turn back on themselves without logic or reason. Staircases lead nowhere. You try to retrace your steps, but the layout makes no sense. You're lost, and that's exactly what Holmes intended. Some of the rooms have special features. There are gas pipes fitted into the walls, controlled by valves in Holmes's bedroom. He could pump gas into a sealed room while you slept, watching through hidden peepholes as you suffocated. Other rooms are soundproofed, lined with asbestos. Some have trapdoors in the floor. One room is fitted as a massive vault with only a single small window where the air slowly runs out as you claw at the door, your screams unheard. But the horror doesn't end there. In the basement, Holmes installed a surgical table and maintained a fully equipped dissection laboratory. There's a furnace large enough to incinerate a human body. There are pits of acid that can dissolve flesh and bone. There are stretching racks. There are tools whose purposes you don't want to imagine. And buried in the ground and hidden in the walls, investigators will eventually find the remains of his victims, sometimes just bones, sometimes dissolved into an unidentifiable sludge. Holmes advertised rooms for rent, specifically targeting young single women arriving for the World's Fair. Many were far from home, disconnected from family, with no one who would immediately miss them. They saw his advertisement, met the charming Dr. Holmes, and thought they'd found a safe, affordable place to stay in the exciting big city. They had no idea they were checking into their own tomb. He hired women to work in his pharmacy and his various business ventures. He was a generous employer, thoughtful even. He'd often have them take out life insurance policies, explaining it was for their own protection. He'd sometimes list himself as the beneficiary, claiming it was standard business practice. These women, trusting and grateful for the employment, rarely questioned him. Why would they? He was a doctor, a respected businessman, a man of standing in the community. One by one, they disappeared. Emily Van Tassel, his stenographer, Julia Connor and her daughter Pearl, who lived in the castle, Emmeline Segrand, who came to work as his assistant, Anna Williams, Minnie Williams, and her sister Nanny. The list goes on, though we'll never know the exact number. Holmes himself claimed during his murder spree that he killed over 200 people, though he later recanted, admitting to only 27. Investigators believe the true number falls somewhere between 20 and 200 victims. Think about that. Somewhere between 20 and 200 lives snuffed out in that building of horrors. Holmes's method was calculated and cold. He'd sometimes seduce his victims first, making them fall in love with him before he killed them. He was actually married to 3 different women simultaneously, none of whom knew about the others. He'd promise marriage to his victims, promise them a future, make them trust him completely. Then, when they were most vulnerable, he'd strike. And it wasn't just murder. Holmes profited from death in multiple ways. He'd collect on those insurance policies. He'd strip the flesh from some bodies and sell the skeletons to medical schools, claiming they were specimens he'd acquired legally. He was once even contracted by a medical school to provide a complete skeleton, so he chose his victims specifically for that purpose, killing and articulating the remains with surgical precision. Death wasn't just a compulsion for Holmes, it was a business model. The World's Fair brought him a steady stream of victims, but it also brought him financial troubles. Despite his various schemes and the insurance money, Holmes was constantly in debt, always one step ahead of creditors and investigators. After the fair ended in 1893, the flow of potential victims slowed, and Holmes's various frauds began catching up with him. In 1894, he fled Chicago, embarking on a cross-country crime spree that would ultimately lead to his capture. In Philadelphia, he attempted an insurance fraud involving a business partner named Benjamin Pitezel. The plan was simple: fake Pitezel's death and collect the $10,000 policy. But Holmes couldn't help himself. Instead of faking Pitezel's death, he actually killed him. Then, in a twist of unspeakable cruelty, he convinced Pitezel's wife that her husband was in hiding and that he, Holmes, would help her find him. While traveling with 3 of the Pitezel children, supposedly looking for their father, Holmes murdered them too. It was this crime, not the murders in Chicago, that finally brought him down. A detective named Frank Geyer, moved by Mrs. Pitezel's anguish, began investigating. He followed Holmes's trail across the country, discovering bodies in Toronto and Indianapolis. The investigation eventually led back to Chicago and the Castle of Horrors. When police finally searched the building thoroughly in 1895, they found a chamber of nightmares. The secret passages, the gas chambers, the torture devices, the remains. The discoveries made national headlines. The American public was simultaneously horrified and fascinated. How could such evil exist in their modern, civilized world? How could this monster have operated for so long, just blocks from the great celebration of human progress? Holmes was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel, though everyone knew he'd killed far more. While awaiting execution, he confessed to 27 murders, though even this confession was likely filled with lies and exaggerations. Holmes lied the way normal people breathe, constantly and without effort. To the very end, no one could be certain what was truth and what was manipulation. On May 7, 1896, Herman Mudgett, known as H. Holmes, was hanged at Moyer-Mensing Prison in Philadelphia. His neck didn't break as intended. He dangled at the end of the rope for over 15 minutes, slowly strangling to death. Some saw it as fitting justice. Holmes himself had requested to be buried in concrete, 10 feet deep, possibly fearing his body would be stolen and used as a medical curiosity, just as he'd done to his victims. His wish was granted. The murder castle stood for a few more years before burning down in 1895 under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was destroyed deliberately to erase the horror, though the official cause was never determined. Today, a post office stands on the site. People go about their daily business there, most of them unaware they're walking over ground where America's first serial killer perfected his craft. Holmes's legacy extends far beyond his death count. He established a template that future serial killers would follow: the charm, the double life, the carefully planned methodology, the ability to hide in plain sight. He proved that monsters don't always lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes they own the building. Sometimes they're the trusted businessman, the respected doctor, the helpful neighbor. The story of H.H. Holmes forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Evil doesn't always announce itself. It can smile at you, shake your hand, look you straight in the eye, and tell you exactly what you want to hear. And sometimes, by the time you realize what's really happening, you're already lost in the maze.